Welcome to Attorney911, the podcast. With attorney Ralph Manginello. Let's get some answers to the most asked questions. We break down the legal issues and provide expert advice to help you navigate life's legal challenges. You might even call us your first responder to a legal emergency. Up next, real-world cases, valuable insights, and practical tips you can use today. It's time to get smart like a lawyer.
Hey, good afternoon, Magali. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Ralph. Good to be here.
I'm so happy you did come back. And, there's so much to talk about after the recent election and maybe some scary or scarier times for immigrants and people that have been here for a long time and are wanting to stay here. And so we have a ton to talk about. Really quick, I just want everyone to know about you. Tell us, your background. I know you've been practicing for a long time. Tell us, how you got into immigration law and what you've been doing lately.
Thanks so much, Ralph. Well, I've been doing this, I can't even believe it, for 35 years now, and only exclusively immigration law. But in law school, I always wanted to be able to help people, and I was really interested in civil rights. Now, it's interesting, though, how from that, when I turned down a job during insurance defense, I kept looking and I found a job at Catholic Charities that I thought I might only do for 2 years. And it was primarily doing court work for asylum for Central Americans primarily. And this was in 1990. I accepted the job actually in 1989 to start in January of 1990. I really fell in love with immigration law. I felt that I was fighting for people's rights. And from there, I went into private practice. But the 2 years became 10 years at a nonprofit. I was running it by the time I left, felt that, it was okay with God for me to go into private practice. And I was a partner at a big firm that does immigration for almost 15 years. Oh, definitely like 14 and a half years. And now I've had my own firm. I left on very friendly terms. I like being the only partner. And I've been doing this for 10 years this year.
So 33 years in the immigration law field.
35.
So 35, sorry. So when you've been practicing for a long time like we have, it's like, oh, I've seen or heard everything. And then the next day you see or hear something that you've never seen or heard before.
Right. Although we did have 4 years of this administration in the past. So we have a little bit of an idea, but you're right. No, and in immigration, things change all the time anyway.
Right.
But yeah, things might get a little different, a little more, I don't know, a little bit more than last time.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Well, so one question I wanted to lead with, which is a hot topic right now, is how do immigrants end up in a deportation hearing? How would someone end up in that hearing?
Well, currently, people end up in removal proceedings in what used to be called deportation proceedings, either because they were caught at the border trying to enter illegally, and they are all placed in removal proceedings. That's been the case throughout the years, in the 80s and the 90s. But a lot of people do end up in removal proceedings sometimes because a notary will tell them they qualify for something. They might be here and were not caught by immigration entering illegally, or they overstayed a legal visa, and they end up applying for something that they think they qualify for, that a notary doing the unauthorized practice of law, we see this a lot, applying for something for them, they end up getting denied, and then they get placed in removal proceedings because immigration says, oh, you don't qualify for this, but you know what? You don't have a status. We're going to place you in removal. That's how a lot of people over the years have ended up in removal proceedings. The other way that I think is common, but, thankfully not that common, but I mean that happens, is if somebody gets arrested for something, even if they're not convicted or charged, the police will hold the person maybe and not charge him possibly. But, let's say they're in a car accident or they're picked up in a fight.
They just end up like in the system. So,
Yeah, and they
oh,
just
right.
end up they're at the jail for a day, and ICE goes every day and they're allowed to go in and they check on people's status. So a lot of people end up in removal too. I say a lot. Thankfully, I don't see that many criminal aliens. It's not that common. Most people are very careful, actually, if they don't have their papers. But people can end up in removal proceedings only because the police pick them up for whatever reason, even if they're victims sometimes, and they get turned over to ICE. So those are the most common ways. I don't know what's going to happen in the new administration. I've never in 35 years of doing this seen them like go door to door looking for people. And I don't really anticipate that. But anyway, you asked, and those are the ways that people generally come to the attention of immigration and get placed in removal proceedings if they don't
Yeah.
have a status here.
And that was going to be one of my other questions, and I'm glad you already led into it, is that, you know, a lot's in the news, obviously now, but even before the election about what I'm putting in quotes, a mass deportation. And then now, what we're hearing is that, well, they're going to deport, convicted criminals first and, this second and maybe this third, this fourth. And so what do you know now, and you may not know anything, but what's the reality of that kind of situation like?
Yeah,
I
I
mean, I
think
don't
it's
know
going,
what's the numbers are and how
yeah.
that legally they can do that without going door to door, so to speak.
It's kind of interesting. I and my colleagues have been trying to figure out, well, what are they thinking? And what they might be able to do is, and honestly, it's still not, I'm not sure about people who are criminal aliens because it seems like they would have already been placed in removal. Maybe
Right.
it's somebody or people who are in removal proceedings already who have crimes, and then they might go pick them up. But it's really interesting because in that case, they could detain them. But if they have relief from removal, unless the laws change, unless they can pass legislation literally overnight, those people would still have a right to see the immigration judge and fight their cases. So when I think about what they're saying, and if they're going to try to target people, possibly the way to do it might be people that they already know have outstanding removal orders who have been allowed to stay temporarily for humanitarian reasons. And those would be easy people to pick out, but the majority of those don't have crimes. So that'll be really strange. These are people that have had maybe a deportation order or removal order from 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And for humanitarian reasons, they've allowed them to stay, report regularly to ICE. So ICE knows where they live. ICE has their address. They're cooperating, and they can also get employment authorization and work. So
Well, that's what
those
I was.
people, it's kind of sad because they're trying to do everything as best as possible. But I do think those would be generally easy for them to try to target.
Well, and that's where I was going to say there's two things that come to my mind. I used to practice a lot of criminal defense, and I've represented plenty of people that, had come here illegally, but had been here for a long time, worked, had families, kids here, born here. And then they got like a DWI or some other, class B nonviolent misdemeanor. That's how I'd
Right.
classify it. And so they're going to have that conviction, let's say, on their record, but it could be 10 years ago or 8 years ago,
Exactly.
whatever it is. And so I just
Right.
don't know, where do they fall on that list also? I mean,
Exactly.
obviously.
And I've got to tell you, if they were not placed in removal during those times, where the DA or ICE came by the jail or whatever, what you just described does not make somebody deportable. It's a nonviolent crime. One DWI does not make you deportable. I'm trying to think something really minor, public intoxication or
Right.
a minor assault, getting in a fight.
Right.
That's not going to, even a fight, but I mean, something minor is not going to make you deportable. So if they weren't placed in removal then, just for being undocumented, and they may not have, they may have kind of fallen under the radar. The police they may not have been in the jail long enough. ICE may not have come by, that night or whatever. So between us, though, how are they going to know then? How can they go through those records and go, oh, we know that somebody that Ralph represented 10 years ago doesn't have papers? They don't. So that's
Right. Okay.
you know what I mean? Like, they
Yeah.
don't have that. They just don't have that record.
Right.
I don't, that's just
Well,
not
now,
there.
the other thing I was going to say, and I'm thinking of is, I mean, we have a high volume personal injury practice, car accidents,
Hmm.
18-wheeler accidents, plant explosions, those kind of things. Anyway, nonetheless, we have sometimes not even trouble contacting our clients, but also like if we're trying to serve a defendant, we have trouble finding their address. So I'm just saying, I mean, it's hard to find people, and
It
much
is.
less if they don't want to be found. That may be, another issue.
Yeah, I know. I think I know they say they're going after criminals first. All I can think of would be people who have been charged with serious crimes who are awaiting trial that they know don't have papers. Maybe that's what they're thinking, because that would be somebody that might be in their custody already. Maybe not their custody, but police custody. I still don't know. It'll be very difficult to coordinate that on a national level. But that's why I think that in the end, what they might do is go after people who already have outstanding deportation orders from a long time ago, and they've been kind of flying under the radar. And it's interesting. I've represented people to help them reopen cases in court, or they've hired me to help them get their residency through their spouse, or, they qualify for something. And it wasn't until I did a Freedom of Information Act request that we discovered that they had a deportation order from when they were, 16 years old and came to the United States. And you would be surprised to know how often that happens. So there are times that people don't even know that they have deportation orders from 20 years ago, really. So I'm wondering, I think one of the ways that they might try to do this, again, the people that are reporting to ICE already with deportation orders, as I said, and they're doing everything right, presenting themselves to ICE in a way that's sad. But I think I could see them finding those people because they do know where those live.
Right.
And, they're reporting regularly to ICE with deportation orders.
Right.
So, even procedurally under the current law, without the law changing, they really have nothing keeping them here other than a humanitarian, something called an order of supervision, being allowed to stay, report regularly, apply for a work permit. So, and again, most of those don't have criminal records, but I could see them going after them first. Another thing could be going through court records, maybe, to find out everybody who has an outstanding removal or deportation order. But then they have to try to find them, like you said, and try to figure out, are they still in the United States? Or did they leave? Or did they get physically deported? So I don't know. I know that you had even sent me an email saying, how hard is this going to be? Or how easy is it going to be? I think it's going to be logistically difficult to go after the people that I just mentioned, even if they try to go through lists of people who've already been ordered deported by a judge.
Well,
Unless
and
they're
I think
already reporting to ICE, they may have trouble finding them. Seriously.
Well, and I think, in discussing it with you and just thinking about it logically, you know, any kind of a large project that you or I take on, much less the United States government, you have to have a plan, and then you have to, revise the plan, and then you have to have resources to carry it out. So even though there's, the Trump's elected for 4 years, it may take a long time to even get the logistics ready to carry out something that's such a
I
big
think so. I mean, I
operation.
think they're going to be ready. I think their plan, and it's just my opinion, but I think their plan will be to try to do some sort of thing that will scare everybody, or be shocking, his very first day. So I wonder if they've got something a little bit planned. I don't know. But again, the resources, the time to do all this, which I hope that this wouldn't be the case, because when I've seen, what is the deportation czar? Tom, is it Homan? I think the one that they say is going to be the deportation czar. He used to, he was, I think, over ICE, the last administration. And I think he might have been behind the families being separated, the children being separated. But I heard him speaking, saying, oh, we're going to target people. We're not just going to go door to door, etc. And yet what concerns me then, based on what you just said, it makes you wonder, will they go after people who are here without documents, but with a temporary status? I certainly hope not, because some of those with temporary status are the kids that they call, not so young anymore, but the ones that they call the dreamers.
Right.
And they all have, the majority of them have college degrees. They've all graduated from high school here. They all have, I know that the people that I've represented who are dreamers all have had college degrees or are in the midst of it or getting a master's and working as professionals, the
And
majority of them.
paying their taxes.
Oh, of course they are. Oh, no, no, no. In fact, everybody, I was going to say, what about people with TPS, temporary protected status? This status allows them to work here legally. And many of them have been here now. You know, it depends on which country. El Salvador, Honduras. Some of them have had TPS for over 15 years. So they've been working and paying taxes legally for over 15 years, maybe 20 years. We've got other countries that are shorter times with TPS, but all of these people, you know, and they can't have serious crimes or they wouldn't be eligible for TPS. So we can basically say none of them are criminals. So,
What?
you know, what are they going to go after them? That's going to look really bad. Again, I don't know that they care. And I don't know that the people who are supportive of that will care. But it would be interesting because it's really, if they do go after people like that, it's going to hurt the economy terribly. It really will. It's going to be very noticeable.
And maybe you answer that. Maybe you answered this next question in what you just explained. But what happens to people, dreamers or other people that are already in line, legally have gone through the process that they're supposed to go through? And I think last time I spoke with you, you said there's some people that have been waiting for 20 years.
Yes.
What happens? So there's a new administration. These people have been doing what they're supposed to do, and they're in this line or in this system.
Yeah.
Does that system still
That's a
continue, or
great
is there
question.
an interruption? Or
You know, Ralph, that's a great question. We don't know what they're going to do. My hope is that that is allowed to continue because, again, there are people waiting a long time to get their green card, and they've been trying to do everything properly. And they would have to change. First of all, they would have to change the statute. They would have to change the designation from Congress of how many immigrant visas meaning visas to live here permanently, that would be allotted to the different countries. And that comes, Congress allots them, and the Department of State, they're the ones that kind of process them. And then immigration will grant residency to people if they're eligible to apply here, or people go to the consulates, you know, in the Department of State in their different countries, to the American consulates or embassies to get their green cards, to get their immigrant visas.
right.
And boy, things would have to change drastically. I cannot imagine that they would be able to change the statute or do away, for example, with the Department of State overnight. That just is not reasonable. People have different thoughts. We don't really know what's going to happen. One of my colleagues, interestingly, said, and I think you'll find it interesting, I hadn't thought of this like this. She said to me, well, I think they're going to want to shock people and scare people initially, and then nothing may come of it. I mean, it might kind of fall by the wayside. They won't be able to, follow through. He may not care, as long as they've got people scared and, I don't know. On the other hand, I've got other colleagues thinking they may have legislation ready to go, ready to have somebody in Congress propose it and see if it goes through the House and through the Senate. And I mean, the Republicans do control both houses. Then again, depending on the reasonableness of whatever they're doing, the House, it's a slim majority. And there may be some Republicans that are thinking, this is not what my constituents want. Or they might be thinking this is chaos, or this is going to hurt the economy too badly. I don't know. But I'm sorry to give you, it's just to give you kind of
Well,
the
I mean,
different things.
it's a complicated issue, and it's almost in the sense of like I think of it, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but like in a healthcare situation when you're trying to fit all these different people with pre-existing, you know, injuries or diseases or whatever into this matrix of how are we going to treat all these people? How do all these people get insurance? How do all these people fit into this thing? It's similar in the same with immigration. It's like you have people that came here when they were 5
Yes.
illegally, and there's people that came here last year illegally, and there's people that came here legally but are still in the application process,
Yeah.
and it's just this giant mass matrix of where do you fit
Yeah.
everybody in? And I think that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you want, I would think, it to be a fair, you know, balanced, equitable, balancing act, which,
I think most
is
people
nearly
would want
impossible,
that.
yes, but yeah, I mean, that's what I would
Yes,
think.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yes, I agree that most people, I think, as you said, on both sides of the aisle, ultimately, like when they're faced with, they know a hardworking immigrant family, or they know, their I don't know, their housekeeper who's been here for years and is so honest and good, and her family's so good, and the children are great students, and she's been working legally all these years with her permit. I mean, I think the majority of people, for example, let's use that as an example, would be really upset if their housekeeper all of a sudden is told, no, no more work permit. No, we're going to deport you. I mean, what? You've been here 20 years and you're here under protection of the current law, working legally. I think people would be generally upset about that. And again, if you're going to try, I don't know, make priorities. The problem is, and I don't know, I don't mean to go on a tangent, but if you recall, administration, Trump won,
Right.
they said everybody was a priority. But that doesn't make sense when we discuss what we're discussing, because you think, okay, if anyone's going to be a priority, if you do have a criminal alien, somebody who's been caught and they're being charged with a very serious crime and they're not here legally, and on top of it, maybe they've been here a shorter amount of time and they don't qualify for anything. Well, that would be, I mean, if I were the one making the rules, that
Right.
generally would be the top priority. And in essence, that's what it is currently. Somebody who's a criminal alien, recent arrival, no relief from removal, no way of
Right.
getting their residency, they would be number one, actually.
Well, I mean,
Especially somebody convicted of a serious crime. On
I mean,
top of that, you get into people who've been here more recently. And that's how it works now. I don't know. I don't know what they mean when they say mass deportations. Are they talking about like what they did to the Japanese Americans during
right.
World War II?
Yeah,
And
that's
so then what? They're just going to, then you do get into what? Knocking on doors, taking whole family. I mean, is that what we want? Is
Well, I
that what
mean,
we are
there's
as a
there's
country?
no doubt that everyone could agree that whether you're an illegal immigrant or you're an American citizen who's a very violent person, we don't want you here.
Right.
It's like, I
Exactly.
mean, like if you're killing people
Exactly.
and
See, I don't
assaulting
think
people and
anyone would
doing bad
argue
stuff,
that.
like we don't let you
Exactly.
here no matter what you are, right? So it's like there's no question
Exactly.
about that. And
Right.
then
We
you
don't let
have someone
murderers
who
stay
been
here.
here forever and own their own business, have been paying taxes, and takes care of their family,
Exactly.
takes care of their community, and so it's
Yes.
definitely tough. Definitely tough.
Murderers, rapists, they're not eligible to stay here permanently. They're just not. I mean, that's just one of those things that pretty much makes you very deportable. And basically,
So
other than,
we're all okay with like let's get rid of those people.
right.
So if you're
I
if you're gonna do
honestly,
that, go ahead. Like get
yeah,
rid
I
of them.
mean, as I said, currently someone like that would be the top priority. I was interviewed on the local Fox News about these terrible criminals, if they did what it appears that they did, and I told them, these gentlemen they're not staying here, they're
Right.
not. I can say from my own experience, thankfully, that is not the majority, and it's not the majority of Americans either. I mean, as you said, we don't really want anyone like that. Sadly, we have to keep our own Americans right there like
Yeah,
that.
right,
But I
right.
mean, somebody like that is the top priority. And I don't understand. And then I hear the new guy, saying, well, yeah, we're going to go after people like that. But I don't think Americans would be happy to think that somebody who got a DWI 12 years ago and didn't hurt anybody, thank God, or had a public intoxication walking on the street and being picked up. I don't think they'd be happy to think, oh, that person's getting deported. Somebody who maybe never had another problem, has been working and paying taxes. So, again, I think people would agree violent criminals, okay, that's okay with most people for them to be the top priority. I just don't know, though, if they're going to be able to go back. Most people like that have been put in removal. I want you to know, I don't know if everybody knows this. And, Ralph, since you don't practice immigration law, you may not know this even though you're a lawyer. And I know that most people don't know it. If you have a green card, and you commit a serious crime, or things that to you and me might not seem so serious, but is serious for an immigrant, you can be deported. You can lose your residency. You can be deported. You don't, it's not something you get to keep forever if you go and commit crimes. So even somebody with what they call permanent residency, the green card, it's not permanent if you commit a serious crime.
No, I
And
represented a bunch of people that
Mhm.
had their green card, and I was working out deals with the DA's office, and I would say they can't do a pretrial diversion because they're going to have to sign this paperwork saying they did whatever it
Right,
was,
if they have to admit it.
misdemeanor, and they were going to get denied for their next re-up or whatever it's called, because it was going to be considered not a conviction under immigration law, but something to where they were going to be considered
What it
deportable.
is if you get a deferred adjudication, that's a conviction. And if a true pretrial diversion is not a conviction, except if you admit to the essential elements of the
That's what it
crime,
was, right?
then it's a conviction. So you've got to find a way to get a true pretrial diversion where they're
Right.
not admitting to the essential elements. Not easy to do, true.
He's
Yeah,
difficult.
it's a problem. I mean, things that for Americans wouldn't be a big deal. And I think it's important for other attorneys and for the public to know, because people are shocked to find this out. Again, that a deferred adjudication, which for an American is not a conviction, is a conviction if you're an immigrant, even if you have your green card already, which is sad, obviously, because it could make you deportable. But also, I think it's shocking to people to know that, oh my, I don't want to lose that train of thought. But one thing is, oh, I know what it was, that a misdemeanor that is truly a misdemeanor under Texas law, for example, can be an aggravated felony under immigration law. And aggravated felonies can make you deportable and may make you not be able to keep your green card, even if you have a green card. So, let's say you get a theft that's a misdemeanor theft, but you get a sentence of a year. Say it's a class A misdemeanor. You get a sentence of a year, fully probated, aggravated felony. Aggravated felony under immigration law.
I
When under Texas law, it's a misdemeanor.
I suggest, and I did this when I was practicing criminal law, which I don't anymore, but I would suggest to my client and other lawyers, if your client has any sort of immigration situation going on, they must contact an immigration lawyer. Just because you're a criminal
Absolutely.
defense lawyer and you think you know what you're talking about,
Uh-uh.
don't say that you
No,
do, and don't
exactly. It's
advise
like
them on
Alice in
immigration law.
Wonderland. It's
I'm
like
like,
topsy-turvy, right? Crazy.
and I would tell my
Seriously.
clients to just, make sure you talk to an immigration lawyer. I
Yep.
actually had some sign off on a letter, that I had in my
Absolutely.
file that they were going to contact an immigration lawyer.
Yeah, yeah.
Their
Not
rights
all
and such.
immigration lawyers do the crimmigration part, but I and many others of my colleagues do it, and it is really crazy. But it's very important innocently, the criminal defense lawyer can create a situation
Yep.
where the client is deportable or may lose their green card or may not be able to get it back when because they kept him out of jail. They're like, oh, well, this way you're not even going to spend a day in jail. And it's like, guess what? Now you have an aggravated felony.
Right.
Whereas if they'd stayed maybe 30 days in jail, a sentence of 30 days, or paying a fine, and it's just a misdemeanor and it doesn't make you deportable. It is really crazy. It's topsy-turvy, Alice in Wonderland stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And I think
So-
the general public would be surprised.
What are a few things, maybe a few quick things, I want to be respectful of your time, that you would suggest someone, if they're thinking about now there's a new administration, thinking about applying for citizenship? I know the laws are still the same at this point. So what are maybe 2 or 3 things you would suggest someone who's now thinking about, they've been thinking about, what should they do being proactive, moving forward and doing that?
That's a good question. I'm doing a lot of consultations and advising people. I'm seeing a lot of people that sadly may have waited, were kind of dragging their feet. I don't know. People do this, and now that it's scary, are now asking for advice. And some of these people, it really depends on the case. I would suggest, number one, have a really good consultation with an experienced immigration attorney. Don't go to a notary. Don't go to somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience or just is dabbling in immigration law. Definitely go to somebody who's experienced. I don't want to say only board certified. I am board certified because I know some excellent immigration attorneys that are not board certified only because they don't do employment-based law, or they do the employment-based immigration, or they don't do removal. But you want to go to somebody experienced. You need to have them look at your case. Some of the people I'm consulting with, I am saying you need to file everything that you're eligible for as much as you can before the new administration starts. Get it filed, get it going. And some people, it makes more sense than others. For other people, I don't know, I consulted with somebody where I even talked to some of my mentees, people that I mentor, but who now they mentor others. I've been doing it so long. I have mentees that have been practicing 30 years, 25 years. But I mean, they think, no, maybe that person shouldn't do anything. Maybe it's too risky. Maybe they're going to be exposing themselves that they're here and they might go after them. So it really depends on the case. But in general, if you qualify for something, I am generally recommending to my own clients, especially the ones that were already my clients and had been dragging their feet, I'm telling them we must file. If we're going to do this, it better be before January 20th. But it really depends on the case. And again, I've seen 1 or 2 that I'm thinking, let's say somebody already has an outstanding order of removal and they know it. Maybe I will tell you they should have been asking for help that we might have been able to give them good help 2 or 3 years ago to try to reopen the case in court and get it taken care of. Right now, it might not be the time to do it because then you're kind of
wait and see.
It's a tough thing. I mean, it really is. It's I don't know. And again, some people that I've seen, they're the kind of people who'd be like, oh, we want to keep them here. They're such hard workers. They have such a lovely family. Oh, they're all so well educated. I mean, and they've got this weird immigration history that's not going to be easy to fix. And now it'll be even more impossible if the laws change or get worse,
What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they wanted to have a consultation and find out what their rights are, and what's the best way from them to move forward?
Yes. And I'm trying to see, right now I've got a little bit of a waiting list, but I really do want to consult and help people. I ask people to call my office at 716-722-2635 and get themselves, if I don't have any openings right now, I think I already have some in December. I think November's full, but they can get themselves on a list and we're trying to fill them up. They can also email, but I think calling the office is the best. I've got a live administrative assistant and my senior legal assistant is her backup, and to call between 9 and 5 on regular work days. But we're good about getting people And if I can't see them and they have an emergency, they really want to be seen, I have got trusted colleagues that I've mentored myself and that I know that if I can't see them, I would trust them to see that person.
That's great. Right.
So I do have a good list too of people that whose work I know, whose work I've even, mentored, and that I could recommend if I'm too full and can't see people.
Great.
And I ask them to please call.
Sure. And anyone, you can always contact us at Attorney911. We'll get you over to Magali, and she will be able to schedule your answer questions. And yes. I hate to say it, but you may need to clone yourself or hire another attorney because you're going to be really, really busy.
I know. I used to have an excellent associate that I trained from a student, and she always wanted to work at a nonprofit. And I didn't dissuade her because I had been at a nonprofit after promising my husband 2 years for 10 and a half years. So I was like, okay, I encouraged her. So she's working at a nonprofit now, and I miss her. It's hard to find someone that you really trust to be an associate. But yeah, now might be the time that I may have to expand again. Yes, yes.
Right. Well, so good to see you. If any of you out there have an immigration legal emergency, you can contact Magali or contact us, and we'll get you over to her. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Ralph. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you for getting the word out to people. Yeah.
You just learned something new. Attorney911, the podcast, with attorney Ralph Manginello. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode, and share it with family and friends who might benefit from the things we talk about. A new podcast launches every week. That means you get more legal tips, real-life cases, and expert advice. This is Attorney911, the podcast.